I'm a professor with the law school and Hawaiian Studies, but I'm a child of the Aloha Aina movement, born and raised on the island of Molokai. This picture here is, you can see me as a 7 or 8-year-old holding a red sweater. That was my first march, and it was to protect Puko'o, this area on the east side, from being developed. They had dredged the reef and they wanted to create something that looks like Ko'olina with, condos in front of coves, artificial coves from a fish pond that they had dredged. So, my community has always been very ku'e in protecting our aina. And so I was raised amongst some of these heavy hitters like Uncle Walter Reedy. A lot of the Protect Kaho'olawe Ohana originals. A lot of them came from Molokai, including the late George Helm. And so I was influenced by these people, and my father was an activist as well. So these are just some like community meetings we've had where like 5,000 people out of 7,000 people on the island show up for a hearing. It's incredible the amount of people that come together to protect Aina. So I was raised in this kind of environment, and this controversy here was about saving La'au Point, our west side of the island, from a multi-million-dollar luxury home subdivision of 200 homes, which was going to really impact the water rights of the homesteaders and build inappropriate development where the makahiki ceremonies end. And so, what happened after that was Molokai Ranch, a Singapore based company, shuttered its operations and 120 people were laid off. So there were some people who felt like the activists were, too zealous and not really providing economic development. And so what followed from that was, a lot of the community leaders came together. And this is part of your reading packet, and I'm sure you guys didn't really have enough time to read everything, but just consider those readings as references for the future. But what came out of that controversy at La'au Point was a lot of young leaders came together, as well as those, our makua who are now kūpuna aged people. They all came together and put together this Molokai feature of a Hawaiian island. And we looked at different plans that we had, and we synthesized them into this one document. And it was important for us to do this because, what we would find is these developers would come to Molokai with this sort of messianic savior kind of mentality that, oh, we're going to save you from yourself, Molokai, because you guys don't know how to prosper. But we wanted to flip the script and say, no, we're the people of this land. If you want to work with us, your work has to resonate with our values. And we're the docking station, and you have to plug into us, not we conform to your agenda. So one of the things we wrote was a powerful vision statement. And it says, we envision strong ohana who steadfastly preserve, protect, and perpetuate our core Hawaiian values. We envision a wise and caring community that takes pride in its resourcefulness, self-sufficiency, and resiliency, and is firmly in charge of Molokai's resources and destiny. We envision a Molokai that leaves for its children a visible legacy, an island momona, abundant with natural and cultural resources, people who kokua and look after one another, and a community that strives to build an even better future on the pa'a or firm foundation left to us by those whose iwi or bones guard our land. And so, we felt that we are the generation that are the seeds that have to be planted. It's our mana, it's our ike, our knowledge, it's our commitment that is gonna restore that pono and that aina momona. And we knew from all these experiences in activism that government and developers, they're like slimy slippery squids, as Uncle Walter says. Uncle Walter Reedy, who's one of the more vocal and effective aloha aina activists. And he said, you gotta grab and hem them, like pull them, off and not let go. And nobody's gonna give you anything on the silver platter. You have to plan, you have to implement, you have to unify as a community in order to get things done. And so that's been I would say, the energy that Molokai has. And it's not just playing offense to protect what we have, but it's also, defense, but we also have to play offense. Yeah. So we went through a series of different things. Um, and, a lot of what we did was restore fish ponds and teach the children. Um, and we're doing this because it was so difficult permit wise. There's like 90 different permits, environmental and land use permits, and historic preservation review and things like that, just to put the stones back on the wall. And so as a community, we decided to be proactive in working with government and saying, okay, let's try and streamline this process so more people can start growing food and restoring this traditional infrastructure left by our kūpuna, our ancient ancestors. We were a bit too progressive for these guys, um, but it planted the seeds such that in, I would say, 2013, 2014, the state finally approved the streamlining of our permitting system based on some of the data that we collected, to show that restoring ponds have negligible effect on the environment. Um, a lot of our people trained in different aspects of aquaculture. So this is a picture of me in my 20s. We're doing limu seaweed aquaculture, and we were part of the trainers for our young people who were restoring the fish ponds. And we also learned shrimp aquaculture and creating these live rocks for aquarium, um, for the aquarium industry, making different fish pens and things like that. So, as an island too, we're very cognizant that in many ways we're like the forgotten island, uh, which is actually kind of good because that means we just figure out stuff on our own, and it creates greater like resilience for us. So one of the things too was we wanted to develop small businesses. And so in my former job, with the rural development project, I was the director for Molokai, and I had to do a lot of workforce training and community-based economic development work. So one of the things we wanted to do was kind of preserve as well as grow our mom and pop establishments. So like we don't have any franchises on Molokai. Every store is a mom and pop store. So, you know, our unemployment rate was rather high. So we're like, okay, how can we create jobs that is very much oriented to our culture, oriented to, you know, our sense of community as a large extended ohana. And so we decided to continue to develop businesses and work with our farmers. So within 2 years time, we were able to get 121 new businesses. And that was through developing this small business development center, Kuha'o Business Center. And through my organization, we were able to hire Auntie Annette, the late Auntie Annette Pauoli Ahakuelo, who had really strong business acumen. And so she helped all these crafters and farmers and, you know, value added producers to form their businesses legitimately and sell their wares. So it was a very enriching time for me to be on Molokai and doing this kind of work. You know, and then we also developed the Lanikeha Community Commercial Kitchen on Hawaiian homestead land. So through my rural development project, was able to hire a commercial kitchen coordinator and food service trainer, and he brought in all these different companies that taught how to do test batching and product development and doing their logo design and packaging and everything. So we're able to get like sweet potato chips and Hawaiian salt and a lot of different and like bakery goods and poi and things like that out of this kitchen that is in the heart of the Hawaiian homestead community. Additionally, you know what happened early on, there was I want to say it was in the 90s, I believe, or late 80s. There was a tuberculosis scare amongst the cattle. And we had a lot of small ranchers, you know, and all my life I actually was fed on grass-fed beef, not the kind of box corn finish kind of beef. And we had our own slaughterhouse on Molokai. But when that TB scare occurred and they did wide scale eradication of the cattle, a lot of the small ranchers lost lost their business and the 4-H and all this kind of stuff. And then the old slaughterhouse got condemned. And so it took about over a decade for the ranchers to try and recover. And so they formed this livestock cooperative and built a state of the art slaughterhouse. And so I was part of hiring the manager and the first workers for the slaughterhouse. And now it produces grass-fed beef and as well as venison for sale, and then they also do custom cut, not for sale, like pork. So all these things were done to increase our food security and food sovereignty. Um, so you know, all these things were happening while I was home, but I started to, um, because of my activism, I started to get backlash against against me professionally. And so out of anger, I formed a nonprofit called Sustainable Molokai, but with the word Aina in the middle of it. So it's Sustainable Molokai. But it also arose out of a dream that I had. So I think I want to encourage you guys to dream and to vision, because it has the things that you produce has to be manifested first on a spiritual level before it manifests physically. So in 2000, around 2007, 2008, I had this dream of Molokai floating in the heavens, floating in the sky, and it was just silvery and glistening and so beautiful. And it felt like that was the real Molokai that all of us were yearning for and wanted to bring into our presence. And it was like bringing heaven down to earth. That's what it felt like. And so I pondered like, what is this floating island? And and then I came across the ancient chant of Molokai's birth. And it's Loa'a Molokai he akua, he kahuna, he pualena o nu'umea. And it basically means born is Molokai, a god, a priest, the first morning light of Nu'umea. And I learned that Nu'umea Lani is the raised place in the heavens. And so I realized that that was what I was dreaming of. And so it gave me an understanding of what needed to be done. Oh, I'm sorry, this slide is out of place. So I asked Auntie Zenny Sawyer, who does like t-shirt prints and Hawaiian designs. I gave her the vision that I had, and she drew this, and it became the logo of my nonprofit, Sustainable Molokai. But this is Hina, um, the mother of Molokai, and she's holding the bowl of poi. And the symbolism of that is that, it's not time for conflict. Like when Haloa, the the firstborn of Ho'ohokukalani, sky woman, I mean star woman, and Wakea, sky father. The firstborn was Haloa Lau Kapalili, which became the taro plant and our elder sibling. So in the presence of Haloa, we're not supposed to have discord. It's we have to have peace and unity. And I knew that my island had to unify around a common purpose. So this is the island of Molokai, cradled by Hina, and before us is this commitment to peace and unity. And the kalo and the manini fish, they're in black and they're in white. And then this is the upena. The upena is to cast our net widely for abundant harvest. The black and white impositions of the kalo and the fish is reminiscent of my dream, that when we see the reflection of the landscape on the ocean, when the ocean is like a mirror, um, we know that the reality is the land and not the reflection. But in this sense, it was the inverse in my dream, that the reflection, the floating island in the sky, was the reality. And we're doing this kahea, like calling forth the restoration of that pono, that rightness, and that abundance. And so the black and white are like, when you take a picture, the negative is that black strip, and that's the reality. And then when you flood light through it on a photo paper, then it becomes the photograph. So that's the kauna behind the dream, and this logo. And then the phases of the moon, these things represent, the planting seasons and the life cycles, and also are a representation of Hina. And then this is the Hina plant, which also is a kino law of the goddess Hina. So what I learned about what these floating islands are was, So I saw a talk by Senator Kalani English, and he talked about the concept of mokulana, the floating islands of abundance. And he said that, you know, as we look at the climate crisis and as we attempt to adapt, we have to bring back this understanding, this ancestral knowledge of the mokulana, the floating islands of abundance. And these islands typically appear at twilight above the horizon as islands of abundance, peace, and equality, where the gods and humans walk together. And so that imagery was very striking for me. Um, so this actually explains, you know, the logo that I was talking about. But what I decided to do was I said, okay, we need to have a conference. We need to spark a movement for sustainability on Molokai, because what I was seeing is all these kind of things occurring, you know, like entrepreneurs and big corporations getting on this green bandwagon, but it wasn't gonna be really accessible to communities like my own. It's, to me, it would just be greenwashing. And so I remember encountering this book by Van Jones, and Van Jones had written this book called Green Collar Economy, and he said that in order for us to really have this revolution of sustainability, it has to go beyond eating tofu and driving your hybrid cars. It has to make sense for the common person. It has to create pathways out of poverty. So while we have a blue collar economy, he said we need to create a green collar economy. And so I brought these various speakers, including Amy Allison, who worked with Van Jones to kind of help in that visioning. But our keynote speaker was Nainoa Thompson, and I felt that he needed to help us in that visioning process. So his speech was so powerful, and it lasted for 2 hours, but it felt like only a few minutes. And he said, "We need Molokai in Hawaii. We need you to succeed at what you're contemplating today, because I really believe that we are in an enormous crisis, both here locally and on the earth. We are in trouble. When you talk about vision, you have to have it, because if you don't, somebody else will. I would like to talk about crisis and the issue of whether we get up and find success or we don't. The leadership that we need has to have these kinds of renewed qualities: courage, vision, commitment to the whole thing, and understanding the power of being unified. You need to understand the power of vision. You need to see your destination. The main thing you need to know is who you serve. Know your vision, know your values, share it, articulate it. They will come. Define your community by those who believe in you and your values, who come for the purpose to work, to learn, to grow, and to share. Do not compromise planning. Figure out every single step that you need to do to make sure that you are successful. So that really helped us, and so then we formed a nonprofit, Sustainable Molokai, to weave our island's rich cultural pathways and legacy as Aina Momona with responsible modern sustainability strategies to really build this sustainable Molokai. And the conference was very beautiful. What we did was we highlighted the momona of our island. We brought in all these farmers and crafters and food vendors into it, and um, we made it so visually beautiful, utilizing things from our landscape. And we had youth contests and all these kind of things. And we made the conference like $10 a person, because for me it was it was always hard for me to go to a conference, you know, pay so much money, be inspired, but I'm only one person. So I wanted to bring that abundance to my island to spark this revolution. And then we decided to determine, like, okay, what is going to make a healthy, vibrant, thriving Momona island? And we realized we had to work on these different um, areas of sustainability and with culture as central. So we have it, the hub of the wheel, the thing that holds all the spokes together as Aina. And Aina is defined as people and land together. Like you can't separate them. And so that has to be infused in everything that we do. And so we've been working this wheel, but mainly focusing like on food sovereignty and security, beginning to go into the energy efficiency, um, and creating that economy, and looking into renewable energy. But there, and throughout that is education. We always do education and outreach. So one of the first things we did when we had no money was we did this permaculture training, and everything was all trade. Um, and you know, I'll put I'll put the link into the I think I don't have time to share this, so I'm gonna just copy the link and put it in the chat to kind of show you like what we did. It really was about trying to heal our landscapes. Um, and because of the a lot of the our ahupuaʻa became degraded from a lot of deer and goat and pig. And so for me, it was like we need to develop our farmers, enhance farming, and enhance the restoration of our resources. So we did a series of permaculture trainings, doing all trade, and inviting international and off-island people, and they paid the full price for the training. But we provided a place, we provided the food, as the trade. So we learned all these kind of things, and that's around this time. That's when I met Matt. Um, so we learned different aspects of permaculture and installed gardens and learned composting, and then we went to different ecosystems and degraded landscapes to kind of see, to do an assessment and try to figure out how can we heal the land. And what also came out of this was, you know, Uncle Walter Reedy. He was one of the trainees. He created an Aloha Aina fellowship program, which is still running. And he created this nonprofit Aina Momona. And so they train the young people in Aloha Aina advocacy work and in healing the land and restoring you know, our fish ponds and taro patches and things like that. And then what came out of this, we were trained as permaculture trainees. And so, I mean, trainers. And so we developed a Malama Honua curriculum. And so these are the Lapua No'eau kids in a summer program. And they have to take like one 5-gallon bucket of everything that they need, and they pretty much live off the land for like 2 weeks. They go to this remote valley on the North Shore, Wailau, and they do all this survivor stuff. But what we did was we taught them permaculture. But as we learned permaculture, we realized that one of the things that permaculture is based on is actually the ahupuaʻa system. So Bill Mollison, who crafted this word permaculture as permanent culture, permanent agriculture. He studied the indigenous agriculture systems around the world and identified about, I think it was 6 most sustainable systems in the world. And the Hawaiian ahupuaʻa system, he's also studied, and he said it's one of the 6 most sustainable systems in the world. And so it was interesting to come full circle. And so what we did was we taught them, the kids, the understanding of ahupuaʻa, and the values of permaculture, which are very values and ethics of permaculture, which is very much in alignment with how our kūpuna manage the aina. And so we looked at the different vau, the different biocultural zones, and areas for planting, areas that were designed, the kūpuna designed for abundance. Like it wasn't accidental. They just followed ecosystem type principles. And then out of that, as our nonprofit began to get small grants, and we formed this, we were part of the beginning of this thing called Food Corps, which is like Peace Corps. So we had 2 Food Corps volunteers, and they helped to set up the Molokai School Garden Network. And what we did was teach the kids and establish, school gardens throughout Molokai, and also teach the teachers. And another thing, like, as we was working on the spokes of the wheel, we realized that we needed to create a database. The problem we have on Molokai is we're a part of a tri-isle county of Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. So our data gets submersed within Maui Nui, the whole county. And there wasn't any real like specific Molokai data. And so we took some training, and I think it was called research justice. So it's like how you research actually determines, it has implications for social equity and social justice. How you research and what you research, what you determine is important. And so we realized that we have to use research as a tool for citizen empowerment. So we created this project called Molokaipedia, which is like a little thing like Wikipedia, but Molokai focus. And so the first thing we did was a Molokai agriculture needs assessment. And it was to help us mobilize and really get a strong sense of the state of agriculture and foods, food security on Molokai. So that was part of the readings that you guys can utilize as a reference. And so we conducted random surveys. We interviewed key people that, whether they were farmers or grocery owners, health food stores, restaurants. We interviewed them all. And then we asked our residents, how they feel about local Molokai food, how they feel about, homegrown produce, and how important, is it for you to eat local, and how important is subsistence to you. And then with the farmers, we realized like nationally, farmers are an aging population. So how do you inspire and grow young farmers? So we wanted to kind of get the demographics too, on their age and how long they've been farming, what do they farm, that sort of thing. And then what we wanted to do a SWOT analysis: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So, what do you feel are the challenges that you face as farmers on Molokai? And so we wanted to be able to figure out where the gaps are so that we could fill it as an organization, and let this research inform the work that we do. Businesses, we asked like how much, what percentage, on your shelves do you sell local, grown on Molokai? How much do you import? Those types of things, and what would you want to see from the farmers? And a lot of them were like, oh, we want consistency. We want, if we say this much tomatoes, we want this much tomatoes every time. And they were saying the farmers aren't consistent enough, so we gotta import from the mainland. And then farmers were kind of saying like, we don't get a fair price for what we grow. And then if we try to ship it off to Oahu, Oahu farmers get the advantage because we have high shipping costs. So these are some of the things that we're discovering. And then farmers are like, we just want to farm, we don't want to have to market. So we realized we needed like a common distributor. So this is sort of an infographic that kind of summarizes the things that we found. And we found that 90% of the food is imported from the mainland to Hawaii. But 53%, grow their own food on Molokai. 40% of the food that Molokai people eat is from subsistence. So we realize, subsistence is really important. But 98% of the food found in restaurants and stores on Molokai comes from outside of the island. So we realized we had to kind of change these percentages, and then we looked at local Molokai consumer perspectives and practices. So all these things, we wanted to get a sense of like how much would the community support, locally grown food and things like that. And we found too that subsistence, like maybe guys didn't buy so much certain food because they was actually growing it or gathering it or hunting for it. So we wanted to determine that as well. And then, as I said earlier, the stores, they wanted consistency from the farmers, and they wanted to set the price and things like that. And they wanted certain things that Molokai farmers wasn't producing enough of. So that gave us a sense of what we needed to tell our farmers to grow as well. And as I said, we found out the age of the average farmer are 54 years old. So we knew we had to grow younger farmers. And then we found out that a lot of the limiting factors was, lack of access to equipment or unable to afford the kind of equipment they needed to expand. Some were water shortage, high shipping costs, operational costs high, the natural elements like wind and drought and wild animals. So we're still dealing with some of these things, and I'll kind of get into that. But one of the things that Sustainable Molokai did after having, done the ag assessment was we created a food hub and mobile market. And so now we have a lot of producers and they set the price, and we have an online market, and you get to know who your farmer is. So there's all these profiles from the different farmers and producers. We also now produce our own eggs. That's a recent development, and we're the only island that actually the local people can sell eggs in the stores. we had to go through all kind of hurdles through Department of Health. But really, this was about knowing who your farmer is, the farmer being able to set the price and say what they have available. So we eat in season, we eat what get, you know. And so it's been very successful. And then my dream really is to have us do small scale shipping operations utilizing like sailboats that's retrofitted with solar and wind to do to chill the produce and value added products, and get away from relying on young brothers. So I think maybe I can actually show you the video. I think we have time. Okay. So one of the things that happened was COVID hit Molokai, and we had to respond quickly. And rather than tell the story, I'm gonna just, well, I'll just say we had to organize. And so I developed a mind map as we were organizing all the different organizations and volunteers. I can just make that mind map available to you guys. I'll put it in the chat again. Wait, hold on. So just to kind of briefly go through it. So like we had to figure out like food, you know, so we had to do like a community survey. And so we had to identify the people that were gonna do this survey to figure out the needs. Um, and then we had our one of our board members who's a fisherman. He organized the fishermen to bring in target fish like ta'ape or kule um, for food bank distribution. And so we received some funding to compensate our fishermen for their work. Um, and then we had like venison, you know, we were organizing our hunters and figuring out the processing and packaging in with the Molokai slaughterhouse, and all the logistics behind that. And then you know, I'm also the leader or po'o of the ʻAha Kiole, our indigenous governance system. So I was organizing by moku, by district, my different leaders to make deals and arrangement with large landowners to allow for hunting on their property and coordinate with the Molokai Hunting Club, which has liability insurance to do some of that work. And then we identified, you know, fresh things to put in the food bank boxes and who could provide that. And then we paid these farmers for that. You know, we had to worry about the, you know, the structure of food bank, and they were only bringing in food from Maui Food Bank once a month, and we were able to get it to twice a month. And now we feed about 1,000 families every 2 weeks. And then, you know, in the summer was the DOE grab and go. But we found that only the high school was doing it. So we had to work to open up other schools because gas on Molokai is $5 a gallon. So the parents had to go twice a day to get the food. So it was like no sense even go to the DOE grab and go because you can lose all this gas money. And then it was, how can we arrange to have the food delivered? So we had different guys distributing the food to the kids. You know, a lot of families are on welfare, so like they would run out of EBT before the end of the month because they was feeding the kids during what would be the regular school day. So, you know, there was depending a lot on the school meals for breakfast and lunch for the kids. So we really had to get a handle on that. And then Meals on Wheels with the kūpuna and doing kūpuna check-ins. So this is just gonna give you like a big view of like the level of organization and to maybe inspire you guys to figure out how you actually do that. Um, Here, yeah. Matt, can you show me again what I'm supposed to press to make the optimal sound thing? I forgot how to do that.
Yeah, sure. Try unshare the screen for a minute and then hit share screen again. And when you do, on the bottom left, there's two check marks that
Oh,
says optimize. Yeah.
okay. Okay, thank you.
China has reported a total of
More countries in
77,000.
Europe have confirmed cases. Most of
Hawaii has its first presumptive positive case of COVID-19, the coronavirus.
We saw the virus spreading, we saw it coming, and we knew that it would eventually get here.
Of the 6 major Hawaiian islands, Molokai has the highest per capita population of native Hawaiian residents. This small remote community is famous for its fierce opposition to overdevelopment. The island has retained a family-based lifestyle grounded in culture and tradition. But with only 3 primary grocery stores and 1 hospital, a COVID-19 outbreak would be disastrous for the island's 7,000 residents.
We're basically all family on the island, and losing even one person to the virus would be too much. We really needed to be proactive. The risk was people bringing the virus here.
Everybody gather over there. Our goal is to protect ourselves by not allowing the virus to come into our island. Whenever there's a threat to Molokai, we always come together. And today, it's a threat not only to the island of Molokai, but to the people of Molokai.
The health department reports 10 new cases of COVID-19 in Hawaii.
Governor David Ige announcing a mandatory 2-week quarantine for all travelers. It comes as Hawaii residents are ordered to stay at home.
With a total shutdown of Hawaii's economy, many families on Molokai were immediately impacted.
It took a long time before anyone was able to get unemployment, before they got their stimulus check. And there was a great need for food because a lot of people live paycheck to paycheck.
The state announced its second COVID-19 death today and the first case of the virus on Molokai.
The first case that Molokai experienced ended up being someone that worked at one of our main grocery stores. You know, being responsible, that particular grocery store immediately closed. The other stores also closed out of safety and protection of the community. When 2 of the 3 stores reopened, they had established very strict protocols.
They come out, take your order, you have a piece of paper, give it to them, give payment, they bring it back out, and you go home.
We had phone orders that we'd take 25 items, and then the people who stood outside could get 12 items, and we would shop for them. It was really difficult, but the people of Molokai really understood that this is what we gotta do to be safe.
It was a really rough time in that first 2 to 3 weeks.
accessing groceries became more difficult when statewide food shortages led to a reduction in weekly barge shipments to Molokai. The situation exposed the island's dangerous reliance on imported food. Fortunately, for decades, Molokai residents have protected their abundant natural resources.
Our lifestyle on Molokai is very much grounded and rooted in the culture, in farming and fishing. We eat from the land, eat from the ocean.
It's made us here in Molokai realize that we can actually bypass the store and still survive. And there's been a lot of sharing. People who know how to get fish from the ocean, people who know how to get deer from the land, sharing with others who are planting.
When you live here, it's not about doing your own thing. There's very strong community service type kuleana. Kuleana being responsibility. We've always been that way. We've always take care of one another.
Nonprofits also stepped up. Sustainable Molokai, with its weekly mobile market, was able to help offset the impacts of the store closures by connecting customers with locally sourced food.
People were desperate for how can we get food. So we currently had our mobile market in operation. It already had an online sales platform. So we were able to pivot pretty quickly to switch to a drive-through model. And we saw our numbers double. We do have a somewhat limited supply of produce, but people were accessing, like our grass-fed beef and our shrimp and anything that we had frozen that was available.
Being on the front lines put Sustainable Molokai in a position to help coordinate a wider effort to help meet community needs.
The first thing we had to do was really start to try to bring people together. So I put out the call, put out a Zoom, just said anybody interested in talking about how we can support our community and those in need right now.
55 families that go to Kiole.
We had over 20 agencies, organizations, individuals jump on the call.
Signage so can set up a traffic flow when needed.
We have amazing, passionate, caring individuals and organizations that quickly stepped up to identify where the needs were and to figure out together how to address those needs within a really short time.
Partnering island agencies formed a collaborative network. Their top priority became assisting the local food bank that was seeing a major increase in demand, but also a serious decrease in food supply.
Hoʻokuʻikahi Aloha Molokai is the name of this group. And it basically means to unify in love for our island, Molokai.
Mask and glove is required. We are blessed here on Molokai because this is what it's all about, helping one another.
Food bank usually brings in canned foods as well as chilled foods. What Sustainable Molokai and this effort of Hoʻokuʻikahi Aloha Molokai was able to do was add to the food to the point where we could give 800 plus households cucumbers, kalo, papayas. They also brought in beef from Molokai, shrimp. We got fish that our local fishermen would provide.
Distributing locally sourced food not only helped feed the island, it also provided income for local food producers like farmers, ranchers, and fishermen.
I run a charter business here, but as of mid-March and the pandemic hit, I was literally out of business. And so I was looking for other venues to help my community. And because I know how to fish, I decided to go out and get fish and provide for the Molokai Food Bank.
The funding to buy the food came through rapid response emergency grant programs.
Writing grants and asking for money a lot of times it's a really long process. But during COVID-19, funders are reaching out saying, do you have any ideas to help serve your community? And if you do, we'll get you funds. Super appreciate them really trusting in us and stepping up to the plate to help serve our community.
Good to go.
Oh, good. Yes,
sir. Thank you.
Thanks to comprehensive testing and community-wide effort in keeping COVID-19 from spreading, Molokai only saw 2 cases in the spring. By early May, grocery stores fully reopened, but ongoing economic hardship means food bank distributions remain critical. Meanwhile, the long-term work to create more resilient local food systems continues.
Hello, good morning. What do you want to drink?
I can take it. So today we are doing our ulu tree giveaway, and with that we're able to get trees out to our community.
You're welcome. So this is a Hawaiian variety, so it's going to grow really big.
Awesome.
I'm so happy that they created this for us to have something to grow, and not just any plant, like food and native food and things that we understand and we know how to use.
Our vision is to help people grow more of their own food. So we've been offering a series of farmer trainings that teaches people the basic gardening and farming skills.
Yeah, lettuce, cabbages.
Anybody notice anything about this particular plant?
We actually teach ag skills to help people become job ready for agriculture jobs, as well as teach sustainability and gardening.
So today we just got our chicks in. This is part of our chicken egg production workshops. Each participant is getting 25 chickens.
It's kind of ironic, actually. COVID was a blessing in disguise because as much as it's a hardship and it's a challenge, through all of this, we see our earth healing, we see our ocean healing, we see our mountains healing, we see our people coming together, we see our families healing, and our communities being even more tight-knit. But ironically, I see this as a vision of going back to Aina Momona. Yeah, we were always known as Molokai Aina Momona, meaning Molokai of the fat lands or the abundant lands or the sweet lands. And the reason for that is because Molokai was known to just have an abundance of food.
So I think really the key to our ability to respond to COVID-19 has been just our community's willingness to come together, to learn from each other. And I really think that's going to be the key to going forward. We want to get to the point where whatever the next crisis is, not only are we okay, but we're thriving.
Okay. Hold on yet. So most part with the PowerPoint, and I'm going to be asking you guys some questions. So let me just, so one of the things, you know, that Nainoa said in his keynote address to us was, when you guys set the course, you're setting it for us. When you're successful, we will succeed. When you become powerful, we will be empowered. When you become intelligent and educated, teach us. I sense that the course you're taking is what you all believe is absolutely the one you have to take. You cannot let fail. So, you know, for us, our kuleana is to teach what happened, you know, and this is, I don't know, like 12 years after we formed Sustainable Molokai. And I'm very grateful that I had that dream in 2008 and that we as a community did something about it, because we wouldn't have been able to respond to COVID as effectively as we did. You know, a lot of it too is about how do you govern yourselves as a community? How do you organize and mobilize your people? So, you know, I teach Native Hawaiian rights. I teach at the law school and at Hawaiian Studies. So one of the things for me is looking at the rights of Indigenous peoples under the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. One of those things is, one of the things that Indigenous peoples have as a right is free, prior, and informed consent, or FPIC for short. And Molokai is, you know, about 65% of our population is Native Hawaiian. And what we did was we resurrected our ancient ʻAha Kiole, our people's councils. And this knowledge was spread throughout the state of Hawaii through different puvalu or gatherings amongst various kūpuna and Native Hawaiian cultural practitioners, educators, legislators, decision makers, environmentalists. And it was about how do we weave the expertise of our cultural practitioners who have knowledge, experiential knowledge of how to malama aina, how to care for the land. And our ancient ʻAha Kiole, our people's councils were made out of a weaving of these masters. And they form what's called a very strong cordage. So this is the makavalu pattern here. And it's the weaving of that expertise to form a strong cordage. And so with what we realized was, government has to work with us rather than against us. A lot of the work that I do is with different agencies and conservation enforcement officers, because there's a propensity to criminalize Native Hawaiians when they're trying to care for the resources, like Mauna Kea, case in point. So FPIC provides a basis, like that sort of docking station I talked about earlier in this presentation, where, indigenous communities should be free from force, intimidation, coercion, or pressure by anyone, be it a government, a company, developer. And they have to provide prior consent before any kind of project begins. The communities must be given enough time to understand and make an informed decision. Informed meaning, that those affected must be given relevant information that makes sense to them. And they should be able to agree or disagree. So consent is about that, that affected communities have the right to give or withhold consent to a project. And that, this decision-making process is in accordance with their traditional decision-making. So one of the things that we did was, what happened is the state adopted this concept of the ʻAha Kiole. They renamed it ʻAha Moku. And what came out of this law was the ability for islands to form their own island councils. And then there would be an advisory committee statewide made up of representatives from each island. And it's to integrate indigenous resource management practices with Western management. So in 2016, the ʻAha Moku Advisory Committee adopted rules of practice and procedure, and my law students and I had a hand in crafting the language, and also, interfacing with a lot of the leaders in the island councils to figure out, how do you actually integrate indigenous resource management? And one of the things that we put and operationalize into the rules of practice and procedure for the ʻAha Moku Advisory Committee was the ancient decision-making matrix for the ʻAha Kiole. And it was to protect Mānoa, which is from the mountain, the highest vantage point on your mountain, looking out to sea. And that realm you had to protect. Kahakai Pepeao is basically where the ocean meets the land, the intertidal zone, the beaches, the sand dunes, the coastal vegetation. And then everything Mauka was from where the soil began to the tops of our mountains. And then Muliwai was all the sources of fresh water. And then Levalani is everything in the sky, the air, the land, the clouds, the atmosphere, the birds, the rainbows. It also includes celestial bodies like the moon, the sun, the planets, the stars, and the cycles, the cycles that the moon and the sun influences the life cycles out on Earth. Kanaka Honua is every place where people reside and farm and live and fish, in like the fish pond area, the nearshore ahupuaʻa resources. Papahelolona is knowledge itself has to be protected and preserved as an important resource. And then ke'ihi'ihi are the elements that make a place sacred and the ceremonies that we observe to preserve the sanctity of these places. And whenever an issue would come before the ʻAha Kiole, they would analyze that problem or issue, and they would critically examine the impacts of potential solutions along those realms, and then implement with 3 considerations. 1, to access the traditional knowledge of our ancestors. 2, to address the needs of the present. And 3, to establish momona or abundance for future generations. So currently there's a deer overpopulation crisis on Molokai. And during the drought season, during the summer months and a prolonged drought, many of the deer perished. And so right now I'm holding all these meetings, and Matt is also helping me with that. Looking at long-term management strategies. But I wanted to kind of get a sense from you as to how you would apply this decision-making matrix and approach to the deer. So I'm going to give you guys 5 minutes to populate this slide. Okay, so just put some of your thoughts in and we'll discuss it. So you got like 2 slides. If your text is too big, you can add another slide. But take 5 minutes, 25.
Should I set up a breakout room?
If you want, but they can. I got the Google slides, so they can actually fill it up. But yeah, if you want to do with a discuss, can.
Okay, I'm gonna break you guys into 2 small breakout rooms. So make sure you got the link open. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's see you folks in 5 minutes or so.
We can discuss it and then fill it out together. Okay, I hope your guys juices got flowing at least. Maybe we can fill this thing out together. How about that? So what was some of your guys' mana'o? First of all, do you guys feel that deer are invasive? Should they be eradicated? How do you care for all these realms? And is culture such that if these deer didn't exist from the time of the ancient kūpuna, do they have value? Is there a way to care for them and care for all these realms at the same time? Tom?
I guess it's like, I don't know if it's just, like I actually just got back from Molokai a few days ago, and I was like helping a guy set up his farm there, and he's a deer hunter, and he actually like talked to me about some of this too. And like from what I understand, it sounds like the deer like they were brought over as gifts for King Kamehameha, and they just slowly overpopulated the island from like a single like male and female. And I know from like the articles we read, like hoofed animals, they degrade the soil, but also in like the like Molokai's like spirit of subsistence, it also I think became, it sounds like it's a really valuable resource for meat, where people don't have to like rely on them or rely on like markets. But yeah, also like the population get too big and then mixed with the droughts. And I know some people were discussing like a culling, at least to a certain amount, because the especially like the ones that are already suffering. But I know some people felt strongly like there are some strong feelings against like a total eradication, just because they had like it really like become ingrained now in people's like lifestyle, at least in the part that I was working in, or like where they can provide for their families without using meat.
This is all very accurate. So can there be a way of coexistence of deer with the natural environment? Can we protect? Like what realms is it affecting? Would you say?
Carla, did you want to chime in earlier?
I think Rebecca made we were talking about, she asked about if it was invasive, and then we went off of, what if we plant like more natural resources to help assist the drought, but then how would that affect the ecosystem and other like opportunities towards where I think in the reading it was saying about water, like did forget natural resources, like especially towards water, how that would play a big part of it in it. And regarding the slide, I mean, I was thinking about like the Mānoa part, like how the ʻAha Council, like on a bigger realm, like how if we were to say like plant natural resources, then how would that look in that whole realm and that whole mind frame? I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been kind of looking at, to protect the Mānoa while having the deer coexist with us, it kind of stems off of this video here. I'm just gonna show us. I'm gonna stop sharing and then I'm gonna reshare to optimize the thing again. Okay. So this was part of our Earthworks permaculture training, and we were we're actually in the area where, okay, so let me see. So we had this guy, Jeff Locken, come and teach us earthwork.
So we designed up a system that would harvest every single bit of rainwater that fell on it. On 10 acres, there's 1.5 kilometres of swale water harvesting ditch on contour, and when they're full, 1 million litres of water soak into the landscape, and they'll fill quite a few times over a winter. And then we heavily mulched those swales with organic matter, which was trash from organic fields nearby. In the middle of winter, we got a funny email saying, we've got a problem. We've got mushrooms growing in the swale. Well, they called it fungus, but when we saw a photograph of it, it was mushrooms, because they'd never seen mushrooms, because they never had that much humidity in living history in the soil. So we could regreen the Middle East. We could regreen any desert.
We're on the arid end of Molokai, and high islands always have this feature, and all the islands here are the same. You've got a humid end and an arid end. And the arid end is almost like a desert, especially when it's been deforested. It's really sensitive and easily damaged, and you can keep it more damaged. So we've got to work on how we make the humid end of the island move across to the arid end and become more like it was, with lots of condensation off the trees. We can do that.
And there used to be springs on the top of these ridges. That's springs. So when our generation came, the generation before us told us of the springs, and then it died out.
Well,
So this place was humid.
I can assure you that we could put them back in one generation. Within one generation, no problem.
Back in one generation.
I mean, we put them back within 10 years, we'd have this flowing.
So even old streams that was once flowing that died, you could actually recharge them too?
While you're having lunch, I'll try and play something if I get a fast enough download on the internet. Okay. You saw the Ethiopian Valley?
Yes.
Yeah. It's shocking what you can do.
Wow.
Shocking. I first saw this gabion, right, in 2002. I know exactly how much rainfall they had in that 12 months because I've been following it closely, right? And it was only 8 inches. And when I climbed it, I mean, literally got to climb it, I walked up on the other side and it was 1 foot off full. 5 meters deep, 200 meters long of sand in 1 year. It is amazingly fast how quick these gabions fill. You just don't, you probably do realize, because you've got the damn fish ponds full of silt, there's a lot of material moving down these dry creeks. It's just because it's liquid. You don't realize when you slow it up and pile it up and sink it, it's enormous amounts of material. That's the problem. This last summer, they had record temperatures. They went to 130, and they hadn't had any rain since March. We checked, there's nothing that feeds it with water, nothing. So this is last winter's rain we're gonna show you. And that's an enormous amount of water sitting in that silt. So much so that it's running 24/7 now. You can see that's pure, clear water pouring out. And it hasn't rained for, since March with record temperatures.
Before they built the gabions, that was the rain would come and then it would dry up. Right?
Well, you saw those early shots where the mud-looking water is pouring down. That's probably what it looks like here sometimes when you get big rains in the erosion guys. It looks just like that. The only thing you can do on days like this is go and observe what we're doing.
Right.
And really
see what the water's doing.
You should never waste the days like this. Always go out and take the evidence shots.
kind of nuts that this is the cost of cattle, and you've got surplus goats and deer all over the place, eh?
Right.
It's not like we're short of protein on the island. We've got an oversupply of protein.
Right.
Actually, you're losing more protein on the reef than you're gaining in cows. If you do the right thing, which is that water that was shooting through, still shooting through, is slowed up. It's not completely stopped. And a lot of it is spending a bit more time there soaking in. The natural response is it'll grow stuff. And if you get in there first and say, this is what I want you to grow, this is what I want growing, off you go. And later on, you'll have to walk people up those canyons and say, we built this. And this was actually, we did this. But they'll say, no, this is natural. This has always been like this. And you have to say, no, we built this. We actually did this, because you won't be able to, you won't recognize it later on. It will completely change it. So this is pretty flat down in this unless we've hit a very flat spot.
Yeah.
This sort of thing here, I mean, this is major gabion work. This is almost the size of that one in the Middle East. If we got up to here, we could kind of run swales out on contour that would be like shock absorbers to this. So the water comes down, hits this big bank, builds that silt field, which levels that water, and some of the water gets taken out sideways like shock absorbers on the suspension of a car. There's a bit of extra water sort of soaks out that way, taking a little bit off the volume. If you repeat that on the way up the hill, there's a lot of shock absorption in that flow.
So does that kind of give you guys maybe an indication of what could be possible? Wait, let me just stop sharing. Does that give you guys an indication of maybe what could be possible?
With bioremediation, like with water at least, still harder for me to apply it to the deer situation.
Yeah, so it has to take a number of different things, you know. So I'm just gonna share with you guys I'm still developing it, but it's the deer mind map, because I've been doing so much meetings with these guys. But we've kind of divided it by different areas, you know, and this Ho'olehua area and Mauna Loa are the ones on the west side that are really, we're trying to work on solutions. So we're looking at deer traps and pens. We have a Molokai hunting club that is kind of working with a Hawaiian homestead, and we're getting this right of entry agreements with Department of Hawaiian Homelands and working with the State Department of Land and Natural Resources. We also had to deal with the deer carcasses potentially causing disease. So we had to dig pits for depositing the dead deer. And then we're estimating that we have to kill 1,000 deer a month to get the population under control. And so we're working with a slaughterhouse and their requirements, you know, they want us to bring in 25 to 30 deer, and we're gonna process it into hamburger and distribute in a food to the food bank. Some were also saying we should get smokers and work on doing like a training program to have homesteaders and different island, you know, residents build smokers and smokehouses. And sustainable Molokai, we might have to make our own smoker as well. And we got to figure out Department of Health regulations on, you know, distributing smoked meat. the hunting club, you know, they have 56 members so far, and what they need is each hunter has to have a hunting license. And what Molokai Hunting Club does is it has liability insurance, so the large landowners don't need to worry about those kinds of things. So, you know, they're working, and then the deer are in residential areas. And so we got the Bow Hunters Club that actually hunt with bow and also air rifles in the areas that are residential. So, you know, and then we're looking at Hawaiian homes specifically because a lot of the farmers are being bankrupted because the deer are attacking their crops. And so we're looking at residential area, ag lots, as well as pastoral lots. And the deer will move, you know, when you get hunting pressure, they move to other areas. So now we're coordinating all the hunts, you know, and figuring out the permitting system and everything. And then getting money for fencing so that the farmers can fence up their land and protect it from the deer. So Matt also brought me in touch with this guy, Kirk Godzia. And Kirk Godzia is a holistic management expert. So he does like this pasture, really sustainable kind of pasture management where you have high density grazing in small area, and then you move them off to another section, like in paddocks. And so the ungulates have like a healing effect on the land rather than a destructive effect. Their hooves will aerate the soil, and then they'll defecate on the soil and fertilize it. And if you move them off into another area, then that area that they were in prior can recover. But when we met with him, he said, you got to get the deer population down first, and then we can look at holistic management. So I'm thinking of all these things. And then, you know, as I think it was Carla talking about Mānoa, I'm worried about the silt going into the ocean. So I'm looking at the gabions to do that, to slow the flow of water and less silt going in. And then if we can direct the flow of the deer once we get it to sustainable population, using holistic management principles and fencing, and then restoring further up in the Wao Akua and the Wao Nahele, maybe we have a chance, you know. So that's just one area, Ho'olehua, where the homesteaders are, but we need to fully develop plans for each part of our island. So lots to think about, but I know I only have a little bit more time left with you guys. So a final thought I kind of want to leave with you is, you know, I see the university as an ahupuaʻa for the community. And as you guys are doing work in various community colleges and, you know, UH Mānoa, as you work through the university system as VISTA volunteers, focusing specifically on community, I want you guys to kind of think, what does this mean? So what do you think when I say the university is an ahupuaʻa for the community?
I think the system has an obligation to, you know, share resources and knowledge.
Very good. Anybody else? Like, what are the essential aspects of an ahupuaʻa? The community within an ahupuaʻa. What does that bring to mind?
makes me think of the inputs and outputs coming through the university. So I guess if you want to correlate students to water coming through the university system and then emerging on the other side.
Nice.
The university's obligation to building up stewards for within the ahupuaʻa and taking it out, building up these stewards so they can go out and you know, not just instruct, but to build more, to continuously grow more and more stewards of aina.
And just the university's kuleana to honor the vow akua, which means that the university is not entitled to everything. There are times when the university needs to honor and respect.
I think
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think to consider like the university and ahupuaʻa, they have to have, you know, like a sense of like matching narratives with the diverse amount of subjects that they cover. Like university can cover agriculture and conservation, but it's, you know, the narratives of that subject should also be parallel to what it's teaching in its business and its policy and law, and Hawaiian Studies, history.
Kind of lost my train of thought, but just going off what everybody was saying, that the university can be both teachers and students, and I think some other aspects to be more of a community-based.
Okay, wait, hold on. I had a glitch in the typing. Hawaiian Studies, culture. Can you say that one more time? Whoever was talking, sorry.
I was kind of just reiterating the fact of, or the idea really of both everyone being teachers and students and collaborating in the sense that we can all learn from each other. Yeah, I'll about it.
Very good. Anybody else? When you live in an ahupuaʻa, what are your rights? Do you know? Do you have certain priority rights as a Hawaiʻina, as a resident of the ahupuaʻa? Anybody know?
Are we still talking about like universities, or is this as an as like resources.
So you guys saying like what obligations university has, yeah? Oh, sorry, where am I? To the community. And now, and Rachel was getting to, we gotta be teachers and students. So there's that exchange of knowledge, right? So when you think of a person living in an ahupuaʻa, it's about accessibility, right? So how do you make that accessibility to the university? How do you create that? As you looking at as yourselves as VISTA volunteers, how do you create that environment by which the community feels welcome to utilize university resources? And there's also that exchange, right? We talked about.
Something that's coming to mind is just to be in that community and build those relationships with people, because I think as you build those relationships, you can build trust and get your ideas out to more of your.
Very good.
From that trust, like you can just see opportunities naturally flowing from that. Like it would be much harder to like say or to force like some sort of merger to happen, but if you have that relationship, then the taking a learning opportunity and bringing it into the classroom seems a lot more natural.
Yeah, and to add to that, just really connect with people and I guess befriend them instead of trying to like force like sustainability down their throats. I think people will be more receptive if they're more understanding to see what.
Receptivity, sorry. Yeah, so you have to have a kind of, you have to approach with humility, yeah. And not with just your own agenda, yeah.
Yeah, and this goes off of what everyone's been saying too, but sorry, listening. So we listen to the aina to know what it needs, but we also, in this position, we should be listening instead of just assuming that we know what's best. It's an active, constant listening.
Nice. So, with respect to Molokai, some of the things I've learned is, if you lay down a strong foundation based on Aloha and Malama Aina, you develop your economy in this way to reflect Hawaiian ethics and traditions, then your community will be prosperous in good times and resilient in challenging times. And I think what you guys are facing, or what I suspect you will face will be very challenging situations, as we deal with the climate crisis, and as we make sustainability, this concept, more accessible and meaningful for communities as you work within the UH system. I mean, that is going to be our challenge. So anyway, I just want to give you guys some time. Well, it's actually 3:00, but I was going to give you some time to have some key takeaways from what you've learned today. Maybe we can take 2 minutes to do that. Little 2 minutes overtime. Anybody has some key takeaways or what they think they can take from this learning today?
I really appreciated seeing the mind maps you had created and just the thoroughness of detail included in those. So thank you for sharing.
Mahalo. Does that kind of give you guys some tools on how you would approach certain situations? The mind mapping? Good.
Especially relating to the partnerships with government and community and like all of the permitting behind the scenes that goes into solving a community problem.
Anybody else?
I love
the biggest. Oh, go.
Sorry.
You can go. You go, Anya.
No, go ahead.
The biggest one I really loved was everything was local. Like me, everything was just towards you. How from working with farmers to responding to the COVID crisis, everything was building up businesses for Molokai. It was all. The approach was all to drive not just sustainable Molokai, but to drive the economy, but towards telling the community visually and implementing that it's all local based.
Thanks, Carla. I really love what you said, Malia, about research as a tool for citizen empowerment, because I think oftentimes research now especially is it can be such a dirty word, and just how it's been used. But I think you showed examples of how it can be used as a tool to really empower and listen and perpetuate growth.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. So if nobody else wants to add anything, I just want to say mahalo to all of you for spending 2 hours with me without falling asleep, and having some good mana from this sharing. I certainly feel enriched by what you guys have said, and I'll take this understanding with me too. I really like what you guys have shared, and I wish I had a little bit more time with you.
Oh, mahalo, Malia. You know, do you have five more minutes right now? Do you have another meeting to get to?
I just wanted to honor your guys' time. Spend more time with you.
Well, I'd love to be able to close this out with just a gratitude practice and allow everybody an opportunity to just share their reflections and gratitudes for the time that we've spent with you today. It's been really nourishing for me. Does everybody have time for that? Wonderful, wonderful. How do I stop the screen share?
Oh, let me stop it, sorry.
No worry. Right on. Okay, so Navin, I'll turn it to you to start off, and then you can pop it over to whoever, and we'll go around the closing circles just so that we can really mihi and thank Malia for the time she spent today with us and what she shared to help equip all of us on the journey ahead over the next year.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Malia. I just want to mihi you for, well, first for taking the time to be here to share your mana'o with us, and for really working holistically with your community to listen and assess the needs, to work with such deliberate planning and organization to really serve Molokai and create more resilient community. And to be able to take those lessons and bring them here today, I think we all really, really appreciate that, as we can take that and reflect on it and move forward with our own work. So thank you so much. Popcorn, Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I have eaten some Molokai deer with Navin and John before, and Navin kind of just told us that they were invasive and it was a baby deer and that it was good that we were eating it. And so to share this space and learn more about the deer and your work that's gone into the island and the food system has been really meaningful, and I really appreciate it. So I will popcorn to John, who I shared those ribs with.
Yeah, just wanted to mahalo you, Malia, for reminding us to never underestimate the power of community organizing and like the strength of the strength in like being able to rely on your neighbors to get through difficult situations or complex problems, and through like just like having a lot of heart and commitment to your community and the willingness to serve. So mahalo for sharing your experiences with us and your stories and taking that time. I'm gonna popcorn to Carla.
Thank you, John. Mahalo nui, Malia, for sharing not just your mana'o, but truly your life's work and representing your kūpuna and sharing your mo'olelo, but your kūpuna, your ohana. It's probably truly an honor to be in your presence. I don't know. I would actually want to be there in person to probably see you hammer this out in person in presentation. But mahalo and for everything. Mahalo. And I pass it on to Anya.
Thank you. Yes, just what everyone's been saying. And I guess what I can add, other than mahalo, Malia, just feeling your absolute love and dedication to the Aina and the community is both nourishing and inspiring. And it's just reiterating that feeling that I have too, that there's just no place I'd rather be, and just feeling that from everyone is amazing. So mahalo, everyone. And I'm gonna popcorn to Rachel.
All right. I just want to thank you, Malia, for all of your wisdom and your life's work. I think it's really empowered me to refocus and to really align myself with the vision that you also have. I think it's revisioned me as well to see, especially in that video, that it is possible to have that community base again and to just work harder towards that. So I thank you for your presence and all of your work. I will pass it over to
Say again, Rachel.
I think Rebecca remains.
Okay, so as a non-native Hawaiian, I really appreciate you sharing all this knowledge with me, and also how much I can relate it to my own community in Sweden. So thank you for sharing all the knowledge with me, and I also feel very honored to be a part of this. Is there anyone left, or was that me, last person?
I think I'm the last one. Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone's already said so eloquently. Mahalo for your time today, Malia, and your dedication to your community. I'm really inspired by just how systemically the Molokai community has been able to approach their community-based resource management. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
I want to share one last thing, Matt, before we close. Something about what Charlotte said, about deer being invasive. And then also remembering that you said Rebecca is Sami or Sami, I'm not sure how to pronounce, but I know you guys are reindeer people, so deer must be very important to your culture, yeah? So, part of my dedication to trying to resolve the deer crisis is because, the deer actually visited me in spirit. I had a dream, and then they keep visiting me in spirit. But what had really troubled me was when I went home in August, I could see them very malnourished and dying. But I thought maybe they would recover once the heavy rains come. But the rains didn't come until actually like the second week of January. And so more and more of them died, to the point when I went back home in January, you could smell the stench of the rotting bodies of deer. And they were looking at us like, just kill us already, and so like 1 week before I had returned home, they visited me in spirit. And they told me, you cannot think of us as invasive anymore. We've been 200 years on Molokai. And then what they showed me was my blood cells were infused with the life force of the deer inside of me. And I could see the DNA molecule, and they were showing me places on my DNA that they have fused with me, from since being a child, eating deer and having my brother and my dad as hunters, my whole family as hunters. And it was very much like blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone. We are one. And they said, we are just as important as Haloa. Haloa being the taro plant and our elder sibling in the Kumulipo. And then I was reminded that the Kumulipo is a chant about our origins, but it's not a chant that just ended when it was uttered. It's something that we have to continue to haku, that mele. We have to continue to compose that song of creation. And we are living people and living culture and evolving. We're not a culture that sits on a museum shelf. As a people that once existed, and as a global community, we all evolve within our respective cultures. And and we evolved together as a global community. So what they began to show me was all the things that we needed to do. And so in a kumulipo, there's pairings, like a species on the on the land and a species in the ocean. And these are guardians of each other. So when one falls, the other falls. So to give you an example, the sandalwood and the whale are pairings in a kumulipo, in our origin chant. And so the sandalwood trade coincided with whaling. So two guardians fell. This was in the 1800s. So what the deer showed me was they are now woven into our creation story. And the pairing is the coral. And so for me, I brought this permaculture guide to save our reefs. And I needed to know how to repair the land, but I knew like there wasn't critical mass, you know, in the consciousness of Molokai that we needed to control the deer population. And then as you talk to conservationists, they explain, oh, you know, deer are invasive. We got to save the native forest. So you got these guys like battling each other, but now we're forced to work together. And so for me, it's like, it's not an option anymore to think, to polarize and think these things are invasive. So when you look at conservation, a lot of it is like, we have to preserve the static nature of this pristine environment, but that's not realistic. And then usually it's people don't belong here. And then you forget about the culture. You forget that these are biocultural resources, that it's about socio-ecological relationships. And so we cannot do that polarizing. We have to always see people as part of nature. And it's that false dichotomy, it's that separation that's saying we're not part of nature, that is the basis by which we can dominate nature, where we don't see ourselves as kiaʻi, as stewards, as guardians. You're not going to take care of what you don't love and what you see as other. So I just wanted to leave that with you as you look at issues of sustainability. Don't look at it in this static state where humans are a pestilence on the land and we got to get rid of them. We have to separate human from nature. I challenge you to look at human within nature, and that human is part of nature, and that we can use the better parts of our human nature to really heal the world. And that we are the highest expression of this earth because of the responsibility and the skills and the knowledge that we have. In that word, kuleana is right, privilege, and responsibility. We don't have rights until we take on that responsibility to care for Tumalama. So that's what I want to impart to you guys here in this presentation, that, you know, Aina is people and land together. You cannot separate. And so in Aloha Aina, it's a feeling of patriotism in your breast that you would die for this land because it is one that feeds you. So that's the essence of Aloha Aina, that patriotism and that deep love for Aina as family. And then Malama Aina is what naturally flows from that responsibility, that desire to care for what you love. Yeah. And it's that holding that ohana, that relationship of people and land together as one. And if there's anything that you remember from this day with me, I want you to remember that. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Oh, that was so gorgeous. Yeah, thank you, Malia. I'm going to close out today's session by offering you a mihi and just expressing my gratitude for the powerful example that you are of not only aloha aina, but I love I think I learned the word or the term aina momona from you. And I always learn more every time we hang out, whether it's just you and me or whether it's in community like this. And I learned a lot today about effective teaching pedagogy and methodology. So thank you for modeling that for me. And also, I learn about every time we hang out, I learn about what it looks like and what it feels like to cultivate joy, unreasonable, radical joy in the face of all the crazy challenges that we have, because we're always laughing more than even though the situations we're navigating are grave, the laughter like helps so much. And it's just been such a beautiful opportunity to introduce all of these young leaders to you and to your work and to your world, and the seamless and shameless way that you go between, like, from policy to spirituality, and it's all embracing, because this work it calls forward our wholeness, as humans, and I just love that. Thank you for giving us that vision of humans as being the highest, potential expressions of creation, if we respond and rise and hear the call that we are invited to be kia'i. So mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. And with that, I'm going to pause the recording, and then I'll invite everybody to, if you want to say your mahalos as you're signing off, you're welcome to. So mahalo.